Welcome back to Daniel Harper. And if you're new here, stay right where you are, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that makes you stop and question everything you think you know about power, money, and the world's most secretive regimes. Let's start with a question that sounds almost too absurd to be real. Imagine standing in the streets of Tehran, fist raised, shouting "Death to Israel," and then quietly owning two luxury apartments just 50 meters from the Israeli embassy in London. Not next door to it, overlooking it, from the 6th and 7th floors. That is not a hypothetical. That is reportedly the reality of Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Iran's former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. And this is not just hypocrisy dressed up in clerical robes. This is the story of how billions of stolen Iranian dollars, money pulled from one of the world's largest oil reserves, are funneled through shell companies, offshore accounts, and real estate networks, building a global empire while ordinary Iranians line up for bread, sit in darkness for 8 hours a day, and wonder how they are going to feed their families next week. Today, we are going deep. We are going to uncover how Mojtaba Khamenei reportedly constructed a secret property empire valued at over $3 billion. We will follow the timeline, dissect the financial schemes, and trace the human cost that has been paid and continues to be paid inside Iran. But before we get to the empire, we have to understand the man behind it. So who exactly is Mojtaba Khamenei? Born in Tehran in 1969, he is the second son of Ali Khamenei, the man who ruled Iran from 1989 right up until his death in 2026. Mojtaba was always different from other political heirs. He avoided cameras entirely. He gave no interviews. He kept his life sealed from public view. For years, most Iranians knew him only as a shadow, the quiet son lurking behind the throne. Outside of Iran, his name barely registered, but whispers of his influence never stopped. They kept surfacing in hushed conversations and leaked documents, in the margins of intelligence reports and the footnotes of financial investigations. Like many inside Iran's ruling class, Mojtaba studied in religious seminaries, but these institutions are far more than places of prayer. They are power factories. Inside those walls, students forge lifelong ties with clerics, politicians, and security officials, all the people who shaped the direction of the Islamic Republic. His years inside the seminaries gave Mojtaba access to networks that reached deep into every layer of the state, and his connections extended further, straight into the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC is not simply a military force. It is a sprawling business empire that runs construction firms, telecom companies, shipping lines, and major energy projects. It controls smuggling routes, owns banks, and operates beyond ordinary financial oversight. To have the Guard's backing is to have access to money, protection, and influence that most people in the world can barely imagine. Analysts believe Mojtaba built strong ties with senior IRGC commanders early, ties that gave him leverage far beyond anything a seminary education alone could provide. By the late 2000s, he was already being described by insiders as a hidden operator, someone who pulled strings without ever stepping into a camera frame. And then came the moment that revealed just how much power he had accumulated. During the 2009 Green Movement, when millions of Iranians poured into the streets to protest a disputed presidential election, reports suggested that Mojtaba helped coordinate the crackdown. Thousands of protesters were arrested. The uprising was crushed with brutal efficiency. His exact role was never officially confirmed, but people close to the regime believed he was pulling the levers from behind the curtain. Fast forward to 2026, and Mojtaba Khamenei is 56 years old, a hardliner defined above everything else by secrecy. The United States sanctioned him in 2019 for human rights abuses tied to those very crackdowns. He still rarely appears in public. And then, in one night, everything changed. On February 28th, U.S. and Israeli jets launched what became known as the opening salvo of the Ramadan War. The target was Ali Khamenei's compound in northern Tehran. The strike was devastating. Ali Khamenei was killed instantly, along with senior allies including IRGC commander Amir Nasrizadeh and Mohammad Pakpour. Reports also suggested members of Mojtaba's extended family were caught in the blast. Iranian state media delayed confirming the truth for days. They could not bring themselves to say it. Eventually, the admission came. The supreme leader was dead. That announcement created an immediate power vacuum. Iran's leadership had been decapitated in a single night. The IRGC, shaken but still functional, moved fast to prevent chaos. Mojtaba, despite early rumors that he had been wounded, emerged as the only viable heir. He had the bloodline, he had the clerical training, and most critically, he had the guards' trust. Within hours, IRGC commanders rallied behind him. His succession was framed as defiance against the United States and Israel, a signal that the regime would not break. By March 9th, the Assembly of Experts convened under emergency conditions. This body of senior clerics technically selects the supreme leader. In theory, they deliberate. In practice, when the IRGC backs a candidate, the outcome is rarely in doubt. With the guard's support locked in, Mojtaba was named the new supreme leader, announced as a unified show of strength. But many Iranians saw it for what it was, a hereditary handover, proof that the Islamic Republic had quietly become a family dynasty. That perception carries enormous political weight. The 1979 revolution promised to reject exactly this kind of rule. Power was supposed to flow from religious authority and revolutionary legitimacy, not family bloodlines. If it now passes from father to son, critics say the system has become the very thing it swore to destroy. Inside Iran, where older generations still remember the fall of the Shah, that comparison is not just uncomfortable, it is explosive. Now here is something I genuinely want your take on, so drop your answer in the comments below. First question, do you believe Mojtaba was chosen because he was truly the most qualified, or was this outcome inevitable from the moment his father took power? And what does it mean when a state built on revolution begins passing leadership down through family lines, just like the monarchy it replaced? I read every comment, so tell me what you think. Meanwhile, the crisis unfolding around his rise is happening in real time. Airstrikes continue to pound Tehran, leaving the city scarred and shaken. Oil prices surged 20% overnight when the news broke, rattling economies far beyond Iran's borders. Ordinary Iranians face frozen bank accounts, empty shelves, and collapsing infrastructure. Families huddle in basements as missiles roar overhead. And the elite, while all of this unfolds, are quietly moving their fortunes out of the country. Mojtaba's silence only deepens the uncertainty. People wonder if he was wounded in the strike that killed his father. They wonder if he is mourning in private. They wonder if he simply refuses to step in front of a camera. In a country already balanced on a knife's edge, that silence speaks louder than any speech he could give. And right inside that silence sits a fortune that is almost impossible to comprehend. Here is the core contradiction of Mojtaba Khamenei, the one that transforms this from a simple corruption story into something far heavier. This is a man who demands sacrifice and preaches resistance, who wraps himself in revolutionary language and frames the Islamic Republic as the great opponent of Western greed. And yet, while those words are being spoken, investigators have spent years tracking luxury properties across the world, all hidden behind layers of offshore companies tied directly to his network. His empire, valued by some estimates at over $3 billion, stands in stark contrast to the daily reality of the people he now governs. And London sits at the heart of it. London did not end up in this story by accident. For years, the city has earned a quiet reputation as one of the world's most welcoming destinations for foreign wealth that needs somewhere to hide. Investigators call it the global laundromat. Russian oligarchs, Central Asian officials, business figures from across the Middle East, all of them have poured money into London's property market. The reason is simple. Real estate laws in the United Kingdom have historically allowed overseas registered companies to purchase properties without revealing who actually owns them. A shell company from a Caribbean tax haven could buy a mansion in Kensington, and the person behind it would remain completely invisible. That loophole turned entire streets into rows of empty mansions, owned by anonymous corporations and locked behind iron gates. When investigators examined properties connected to Mojtaba's network, they found his people using exactly the same system. But what separated this from an ordinary foreign investment case was the identity behind those purchases. This was the family of one of the world's most vocal anti-Western leaders, quietly storing hundreds of millions in the heart of Britain. None of the properties are registered in Mojtaba's name. Instead, ownership moves through companies set up in offshore secrecy jurisdictions, Cyprus, the Isle of Man, places where corporate structures are deliberately designed to be difficult to trace. On paper, these firms look completely unrelated. In reality, they form a connected chain that leads every time back to the same source. One name keeps appearing at the center, Ali Ansari, an Iranian businessman who shows up repeatedly in property documents, corporate filings, and financial transactions. He signs the paperwork. He runs the companies. He appears on paper as the legal owner. But investigators believe he is functioning as a front, a buffer ensuring that official documents, if ever scrutinized, point somewhere other than Mojtaba. The London holdings are extraordinary in both scale and location. 2 luxury apartments in Kensington Palace Gardens, one of the most exclusive streets in the world. They sit just 50 meters from the Israeli embassy, overlooking it from the 6th and 7th floors. Purchased in 2014 and 2016 for a combined £35 million, they are now estimated to be worth $50 million or more. Their proximity to the Israeli embassy has raised direct security concerns, especially after arrests of alleged Iranian operatives in Britain accused of planning attacks nearby. And those 2 apartments are only the beginning. The network connects to more than a dozen properties across London, including at least 11 mansions along Bishop's Avenue, better known as Billionaires Row. Many of these homes sit completely empty behind tall metal gates. No lights, no residents, just locked wealth sitting in one of the world's most valuable postcodes. Estimates put UK holdings at well over £100 million, with some analysts suggesting closer to 200 million, and the footprint does not stop there. Across Europe, investigators have traced connections to the Hilton Frankfurt Gravenbruch, a 5-star hotel near Frankfurt Airport, a luxury resort in Mallorca, a golf course on that same island, a ski resort in Austria, a shopping center in Germany. The European portion of this network alone is estimated at roughly 400 million euros. Add the Swiss bank accounts holding hundreds of millions, reportedly moved through Liechtenstein to stay hidden. Add luxury apartments and office towers in Madrid. Add banking connections running into Syria, Venezuela, and parts of Africa. And add vast tracts of land near Mashhad inside Iran itself, where public fields have reportedly been converted into private estates the size of small neighborhoods. Put it all together, and you are looking at a total empire worth, by recent estimates, well over $3 billion. Now, before we push further, if this kind of investigation into hidden money and the power structures that actually run our world is what you're here for, this is the channel for it. Please subscribe to Daniel Harper. 2 seconds. It costs nothing, and it genuinely helps this kind of work reach the people who need to hear it. Back to it. $3 billion demands one obvious question. Where did all of it actually come from? Iran sits on some of the world's largest proven oil reserves. For decades, oil sales have been the dominant source of government revenue, tens of billions of dollars in strong years. In most countries, that money flows through a national budget that parliament can examine. In Iran, it moves very differently. Revenue frequently passes through institutions operating with minimal public oversight. The IRGC is one of the most powerful players in that system. What began as a military force has expanded into construction, energy development, telecommunications, and infrastructure. When national contracts are awarded to guard-linked firms, the line between state money and private enrichment effectively disappears. Then there is CTAID, an institution that grew from managing post-revolution abandoned properties into a massive financial network holding stakes in banks, pharmaceutical companies, and real estate portfolios. Unlike government ministries, CTAID does not report to Parliament. It reports only to the Supreme Leader. International sanctions have targeted Iran's banking sector and oil exports for years, but sanctions rarely stop money entirely. They redirect it. Over time, Iran built one of the most sophisticated sanctions evasion systems anywhere in the world. Tankers disable tracking systems, crude transfers between ships at sea to obscure origin, front companies cycle through names and ownership structures, paper trails are deliberately made complex. Once funds reach international banks through indirect routes, they can move almost anywhere, and real estate becomes one of the safest destinations. A luxury property transforms oil revenue into long-term assets protected by foreign legal systems. Economists estimate tens of billions leave Iran every year through channels like these. The structure behind Mojtaba's properties mirrors this pattern precisely. National wealth meant for an entire country ends up stored in luxury real estate in some of the world's most expensive cities. That contrast fueled the rage that exploded onto the streets in 2022 following the death of Mahsa Amini. Her arrest by the morality police became the spark for nationwide protests that grew far beyond the original incident. People were not only demanding justice for her, they were releasing years of accumulated anger over corruption and inequality. For families struggling to afford basic necessities, discovering that luxury apartments sit empty in London does not feel like a distant news story. It feels like a personal betrayal. In 2026, those tensions have only intensified. Regional conflict has brought airstrikes and destruction. Iran responded by targeting Gulf energy infrastructure, sending crude prices up roughly 25% in days. That shock travels. Drivers feel it in Johannesburg, in New York, across Europe. Inside Iran, banks have restricted withdrawals. Shelves stand half empty. Inflation has pushed basic goods out of reach for millions. Power outages stretch 8 hours daily in many cities. Children do homework by the dying light of a phone screen. When electricity returns, parents are calculating whether they can cover the next round of bills that keep rising. Bread lines have grown longer. Families are cutting meals. Demonstrations are back in the streets, this time mixing the memory of Mahsa Amini with direct anger at what protesters describe as a ruling circle systematically moving the nation's wealth abroad. The IRGC has publicly reaffirmed its loyalty to Mojtaba. Activists and diaspora communities are calling for tougher international pressure on the financial networks surrounding the ruling circle. Freezing these assets would strike directly at the financial infrastructure, keeping the regime insulated from the devastation it has created for everyone below it. Those empty mansions in London and villas in Dubai are not symbols of hypocrisy alone. They are the vaults keeping the regime financially alive. Hitting them hits the arteries of power. Which brings me to the second question I want to leave you with today. And please leave your answer in the comments because I genuinely want to hear your perspective. Do you believe Western governments have the real political will to freeze these assets and close the loopholes that allow this kind of wealth to hide in plain sight? Or has the global financial system grown so comfortable with this money that nothing will actually change? Tell me what you think below. For many Iranians, the existence of these properties is documented proof of betrayal. A system that demanded sacrifice from its citizens, that asked them to endure sanctions in the name of principle, was simultaneously building a private global empire on their behalf. For regulators worldwide, it is a reminder of how effortlessly wealth flows through a system never designed to stop it. And for the rest of the world, it is a clear view of how power, money, and politics cross every border without friction, leaving empty mansions in London, ski resorts in Austria, and accounts stacked in Switzerland, while families on the other side of the world sit in the dark, counting what little they have left, wondering how they will get through the week. That is the story of Mojtaba Khamenei, not the version state media will ever broadcast, the version the money itself tells, if you know exactly where to follow it. Thank you for spending this time with Daniel Harper. If this story stayed with you or made you think differently about any part of what you heard, share it with one person who needs to hear it. And if you are not already subscribed, please do it now. It takes 2 seconds, it costs you nothing, and it makes everything possible for keeping this kind of independent storytelling alive. I will see you in the next one.